so.
Mind turning
No,
that?
I don't mind. All right, we are recording them both.
We'll call the March 24th meeting of the Tilton North Central Fire and EMS Fire Station Building Committee to order at 5:30. Those President Matt Ozier, Tim Sackler, Kevin Waldron, Chief Sean, and Deputy Chief Greg, and Paul Blaisdell. First order of business is accepting the minutes of November 5th. Has everyone read the minutes? I make a motion to accept the minutes of 11:5 as written.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
You are not. I'll second it. Sorry. Oh, that's all right.
Any discussion, Kevin? You good? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Done. So, tonight's meeting is to kind of regroup and decide what the next move is. So I'll turn it over to Commissioner Tim.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming, and wish we had a bigger turnout. But the commissioners, as some of you have been, some of the meetings, some of the meetings, we're wanting to continue to move forward. And at the district meeting, we have gone with the dollar amount that Lorero had provided, and after discussions with others, the thought was that that was an excessive amount and that we could get done what we needed to get done for less money. And so the dollar amount was amended to $100,000, and that amount passed at the meeting. The other item is that the commissioners had talked about putting out an RFP, and the information to put that together has been sent to our attorney. Have him take a look at it, and the hope would be that the commissioners will meet next week, and we'll review this meeting and then move forward with what our expectation is to send out an RFP, and the RFP will be for a two-station solution, but in a very different format. And that format sort of evolved out of a couple station visits and discussions with others, including the architect from Barker and the other architect from, I forget what his name, Jason from the other company, and also conversations that we had with Lorero in reference to building a more, we keep hating to use the term, but a more value-oriented building, and to change the scope of the project to not do anything to this building, but the next to it, those items which are not here. So that would be housing. Wouldn't need decon because we'd utilize the decon that's already in this building. Wouldn't need the medical storage room because it's already in this building. Those type of things. And the construction would include things like interior masonry walls, which the more we look into it, the more that amazingly drives up the cost. It was kind of interesting talking to one of the other architects, and remember up at Sanborn Road, we talked about, well, if we got rid of a door on the back and just had that masonry, and it was going to cost more to be masonry than to have a door, because masonry is that expensive. So those types of things. And then, also we've had a change of leadership between last fall and now. And after discussions with Sean, Greg, and Mike, and the viewing of some of the stations, the realization that some of the rooms that we had proposed or Aurora had provided are larger than necessary. And so sort of a rework of that whole floor plan and room sizes and such. So that's sort of the thoughts that have been going through our head. We wanted to get together with the building committee, because you've been hearing what the community's been saying and get your input on that. And then I'll bring that back to the commissioners meeting next week. So sorry for rambling on there. Hopefully I didn't confuse anybody. Was there anything that maybe you wanted to add?
No, I think we've toured 2 very good fire stations recently. We toured the New Boston fire station, which just it was. I don't even think they had their grand opening when we went. It's a new 17,000 square foot. It's over 17,500 square foot building.
It's big.
It's big. They were able to secure a grant because they have the only active duty military base in the state of New Hampshire. And so they got a DOU grant. But we do not have, unless you find an active duty station anywhere, there's really no grants available, unfortunately. But anyway, they were able to build that station for, with site work, $9.2 million. 9.2. That was with site work and everything. It was like 8.7 plus some, but it was 9.2. Beyond our needs, I think. Beautiful station. They brought.
You could drive the trucks in
Yeah.
circle them inside the building.
So.
Apparatus bay was so large.
And then that was technically a wood framed building. Now there's a steel structure with wood frame, and we wanted to see what that would look like and see. And I believe it exceeded my expectations, what that building looked like. We also toured the Hudson Fire Station on Lowell Street. That was completed, I believe that was completed in 2019 or 2020. That's a substation. And in my opinion, it would be a very, now, not to get too deep unless you want me to, at Sanborn Road, if we did a headquarters, it would be set up a lot like that Hudson Station. It's just 4 bays straight across the living. It's and that one was all masonry, but it could easily be changed to.
Do you remember what the square footage was on that?
That station was 7,000, somewhere in the 7,000s. I want to say 7,400 square feet. That was with the apparatus space, living space for 6, 2 offices. Didn't have. It wasn't a headquarters station, but I wanted to see what apparatus bays looked like. You can see them on paper, and you put a truck in there, but it's not the same as going in. And those apparatus bays were more than adequate. We could fit the boat. They actually had a 6-wheeler in between 2 of their ambulances. Very, very good setup.
And was that the one with the 2 bays were deeper than the other?
They had 2 bays that were designed for an ambulance and 2 bays that were designed for a ladder truck, so our ladder truck could fit in. But you could square that off. There was a 10-foot difference between 2 of the apparatus bays and the other 2 apparatus bays. So they would just and I think that was more of an architectural thing than it was really a design thing, just for the looks of the outside of that station. So I just wanted to get a good idea of what does a 100 square foot bunk room look like? What does a smaller day room, because they do have smaller day rooms in their smaller kitchen area. At the Hudson Station, the only thing I really didn't like was the size. The gym was too small, in my opinion. Everything else was very well adequately sized. So I could ramble on all night. I don't want to.
Well, my question, the move to continue moving forward on Sanborn Road without an agreement with the taxpayers of the town of Tilton. Because, we designed a building and we don't get access to the land. unless we've got a guarantee for that property. I think it's a big gamble. If the intent is to trade Center Street for Sanborn Road, there's no need to have a building design on Sanborn Road prior to that agreement, right? If we're gonna tear down Center Street and pave it, give it to the town, they're gonna give us the lot on Sanborn Road. There's no need for a building design. I think without that agreement in hand, it's a big risk.
I can certainly speak to that in many different ways, but every conversation I've had with selectmen and Scott Hilliard and Tim Pearson and other people in Tilton, the value of that property up on Sanborn Road is very limited to what they can use it for. And the town has a really big desire to have more parking. And obviously the town can do this if they want to, but they're not going to, nor would I suggest that without going to the taxpayers in the district meeting. But as being a Tilton taxpayer, I certainly wouldn't agree to doing the land swap unless it was tied to a proposal that I could support that was also being presented at the same time. Now, granted, you could write a proposal to get approval from the taxpayers at Tilton that if the fire department came forward. But again, it's a little bit more difficult to sell than to sell it as, hey, by the way, here's this proposal for the fire department, and you get good agreement with it, and in conjunction with it, it's a land swap, and the community being supportive of it. But additionally, when we had the money spent for the Tilton School property, there was no agreement on that property. And when we did the proposal for the Manville Road project, there was no agreement with that property. That's the way this works. I have friends who work in that kind of industry, and they'll take a piece of property and they'll go, what could possibly fit on there? Because some realtor wants to approach the owner, so they'll contract out with a survey company to go, tell me what would work on that piece of property, and I'm going to pitch it to CVS, because I think a pharmacy would go put in the corner, and if I get some buy-in from CVS, I'm going to go approach the landlord and see if they'll sell it. Happens every day. That's how it works. I know we all want it to be in concrete, but as I'm a Tilton voter, I'm not going to vote to approve that land swap if I don't think there's ever going to be a fire department. I think the two have to go together.
Would you vote to sell it to the fire district?
Absolutely not.
What you're talking about occurs in private enterprise, private money.
What incentive does the town of Tilton have to sell that piece of property to the fire department?
They're going to have an opportunity to buy Center Street.
Potentially. I mean,
I think they would be the highest bidder.
I can see them I can see that you could, as a town, put out a warrant article that says, if the fire department can get approval to build a new fire station, the town will then agree to do a land swap, and you can ask the voters if they would be in favor of that.
That would be
But
advisory only. There's no teeth in that.
So again, are you going to present that? And the town of Tilton, until, in my opinion, until I see that there's a viable plan, I'm not going to put any limitations on that property up there. What if the town decides to do something else with it?
They got like 2 things they can do.
Right, but I'm not gonna certainly tie my hands.
I've been at just one, so I haven't been to all the other meetings, but the one meeting I went with the selectmen, now there is 2 new selectmen, but those selectmen were very in favor of it. It was very favorable from their opinion. I believe the people I've talked to have a favorable opinion. Has there been some negativity towards it? Yes, but very little that I've seen. Everybody I've talked to is excited about it if it's a land swap. I think not going the design-build route, while design-build will maybe save you money in the long run, I'm still learning and talking and figuring out the difference between construction management and design-build, but we're not going to have another $198,000 to design these buildings before they go to bond. A construction management process is going to be a lot less expensive than that design-build process to find that out, and waiting a whole year to go to warrant. The money that the construction management's going to cost will probably, that's going to be the inflation in the building. You know, so it's, I mean, I hate to say it like that, but, you know, waiting a whole another year to get that approval and then going back and trying to get more approval, I guess is.
Which I think what you just said sounds like, I mean, that makes sense though. If you come forward and say, yeah, we got this fire station that's gonna go here, and Tilton's gonna get Center Street for a parking lot. I think that makes sense.
And the other thing in here is we're gonna get no support from Tilton if the only solution is a station here at Park Street. You're gonna move 2/3 of the calls, response time increase on 2/3 of the call, and that's primarily Tilton response. They're not gonna support that.
What is the commission? Some of the stuff you talked about is brand new to me right here, right now. When was all that decided? 'Cause you guys haven't been meeting.
We have talked about, well, no, it was, we talked about changing the warrant to 100,000 and putting it out for bid. We talked about keeping the basic idea of the 2 locations and just rescaling it. We've talked about that. And we wanted to get the feedback of the building committee, and unfortunately there's not more here, to bring forward to our meeting next week. We have a meeting next week, so that we can decide how to move forward. And one of those steps moving forward is to get a RFP together, and the RFP is going to require a little more detail of how we
You
want
said
to
you've
move
already
forward.
done that and you showed it to the lawyer.
We put together a primary, is this how we do an RFP? Can you look at it? But we still have to put some details in there, specifics that we're going to ask the respondents to the RFP.
Who did that and when is the question?
So most of the RFP work with the lawyer, it's just, I had a conversation with him. I started building a basic RFP before district meeting, just, you know, and then I spoke with Eric Mayer, our lawyer, about how do we get exactly that, and he said he would help me draft the RFP. The RFP won't go out until the commission approve it, but we can change what's in that RFP. But the general idea of the RFP basically can be completed now, and then, because we need to get this out now. If I wait for them to have a vote, go create an RFP, and then that happens in April. Then in May, here's your approval for the RFP. Then that RFP goes out in June. We are beyond the district meeting in 2027.
So we provided them with the RFP that we used when we hired Lorero. And we provided them with sort of an outline of what this 2-station scenario that we came up with is. And said if we would help us to properly verbalize an RFP. And he was also very good at it. Came up at the meeting about the language so that you didn't have to take the lowest bidder, you could take the bidder that best met your needs. And he was all on top of all that verbiage. So we hope that by
Chief
next
has done
week,
the work, commissioners.
I've done the work in conjunction with Tim. I mean, I haven't, is that what you're,
well, I mean, yeah, he sent the old RFP over and sent over sort of an outline of what we've done so far. And we're hoping that by next week, he'll come back with a list of questions that we're gonna need to answer and provide information so that an RFP can be created.
What is your vision for San Paulo?
Well, that's part of the discussion for next week. So the vision would be scaled down building up there as compared to what we presented. And over here, just doing the living admin space, if that's, what we decide, but at a separate building and leave this here. And as I said, remove anything that's in that building that we aren't going to duplicate or replace that's already here, like the decom.
In the decon room that was in previous plans, that we were told we had to have way beyond what we have right here, right now. Yes.
yeah, would you like,
So-
so you're absolutely right.
The decon that was in the previous plans in both buildings,
Yep.
that we were told we had to have that.
So the decom plan had an extractor, it had a gear dryer, had an SCBA washer, and had a shower. Is it all in the same room here? No, but we have that. We have an extractor, we have a dryer, we have a shower, and we have the SCBA washer. Would I like it to be an enclosed room? Would I like it? Yes. Yes. If we build something on Sanborn Road, it would have that, but we're not. After the two meetings we had here, it was clear that the 21 million, I can't remember, plus or minus station was not going to pass. And we have to move forward. We have to keep going. If I was ripping this building down and starting over, would I build it like this? No. But we've been told by multiple people multiple times that this station, Northfield wants to keep this as is. And I've heard that multiple times. So if we do an addition on it, we already have an SCBA washer, we already have a gear dryer, would I ever design a station like this? No. And it doesn't make sense to design a station like this, but we already have it here. Let's get something done. I've been here for 20 years, and I've been told not to paint the front of that station for 20 years because I won't be there for 6 more months. So for 20 years, I've been looking at the paint falling off that building with the inability to paint it because I want to and I can't. We need to get to a station. And is this perfect? No. I don't live in a perfect world. We don't. And unfortunately, we have to live with what we have. Again, did Sanborn Road look like this? No. But this is what we have here.
And my hope would be that, once we have that new building out here, in 20 or 30 years, the district can decide to tear this building down and rebuild it to whatever the needs are 10 or 20, 30 years. And then they can put in whatever the state-of-the-art decon room is at that. And I think also, let's see that station in New Boston, we want to reconfigure the decon room because they had a much better decon room than
They had a much better and smaller decon in a smaller space.
what we had.
I really liked New Boston's decon space, and it was not considerably smaller, but it was smaller. Didn't have the individual shower, one big shower to spray off.
And I think that there's a lot of things that we noticed that, sort of a sidebar here, I apologize, New Boston that came about because I think we were dealing with an architect there who built fire stations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at Lorero, we're dealing with people who build buildings, but might not necessarily specialize in fire stations.
So I just heard more I believe factual understanding and willingness to compromise, if that's the right word, from this chief and the present and the chief on the back of the
been a pleasure working with Sean these last 4 or 5 months.
Everyone else is like, we have to do this, we have to have that, it's got to be this way. You heard that a certain number of times.
And I think a lot of things that we were talking about at the building committee meeting got filtered before it ended up at the railroad. And I think that probably could be said for previous 2 plans as well. So I think we're in a much better place moving forward.
Well, I agree with that. I share all those candidates with Sandy. He did. So I think being a municipality, it's like a total slide. As long as it has a majority. Can't commit. I don't. If the fire district is a special village district, I don't know if the commissioners have that same. What's it called?
Authority.
Yeah.
Authority to enter into
I mean, back when this first came up, the first time we approached town itself, they started putting together a document. And we got the draft copy of that, but then the leadership change of the admin changed over there at town tilt, and then it got lost. They gotta keep looking into it. We provided it to Scott Hillier. But that really hasn't moved forward.
Well, I see it's
Probably have a rotation of the board of selectmen and potentially town administrator. That's always true. And with limited exceptions, one board can't commit one to
I see a scenario where if we don't have the green on the same board beforehand, we can get tripped up. In that scenario, if the district makes a proposal and it gets approved, Tilton townspeople who are against that approval now can raise their hand with a no vote on the land transfer. So even having an approved building and budget doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the building on Sanborn Road.
And the timing was the opposite, because the Tilton town meeting would come before the fire district. So you would know whether it got approved or Tilton town before you had to go and have the district.
If those votes occurred in the same season, and that's your intention is to bring all of this up next year.
I think a lot of the work, you guys did a tremendous amount of work as the building committee. You have the geotech done, you told us what station you told us that Sanborn Road and this site were the right sites for a two-station design. You told us how many bump rooms we need. So we're gonna go forward with that. I think it's, so it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. So if we get an RFP out quickly, once we get the architect, we'll hire the architect first, get a design out, and then hopefully, in a perfect world, by June or July, you'll be, looking for a bid from a construction company, so a second RFP would go out for that. That's the timeline I know that's an aggressive timeline, but you guys have done so much of the work, the geotech's been done, all that stuff, so we don't have to get that geotech done, we don't have to get that. They can get going on an architectural design pretty quickly, because we know that the program you guys designed, and just cutting some of the spaces, making them smaller, making the apparatus space smaller, making the offices smaller.
One of the other big areas where I think we found savings would be, we were in New Boston, they don't have municipal sewer there either. So they had to put their holding tanks in. And said so far, the building's been open since,
You said 3 weeks they've been in there, right? Something like that.
it was more than that.
Was it there more than that? Yeah.
But it was $500 to pump the holding tank that the garage floors and the drain into. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, $900,000 to connect a sewer, or pumping that tank 4 or 5 times a year. You can pump that tank an awful lot for $900,000. And he said,
You could buy your own pump.
So what they did,
and they had several stations that had tanks. in the ground.
so I
don't
believe he
know.
said, was it Peterborough or Jaffrey, the one they're building now is the same way, but, so what they do is they design a traditional septic system for the administration space and all the showers and all that, and that's just a normal septic. Then the apparatus bays aren't expected to have a hazmat, so they can just pump into a tank, and then they basically, it's just like pumping out a septic system, and then that gets taken to the sewer. The only thing that needs to be tested, there's another tank that comes out of the decon room, and that needs to be tested every so often. The company, I'm actually working with a company right now, because we have an oil water separator back here that hasn't been done in about 10 years. And so he came and stuck it on last Wednesday and inspected it, but I spoke to him about doing it, and he's like, yeah, we do stuff like that all the time. You know, once you get testing, and if it doesn't come back, with hazmat in it, or if it's so, then you can test, the frequency goes out, and the period goes out longer and longer. So that it's, a lot of fire stations are doing that. Now, in 30 years, will I exceed the cost of that $800,000 probably to do the sewer line? Yes, but it's gonna take 20 or 30 years. So would I rather be hooked up to septic? I mean, sewer, yes, but it's, again, just like this building, there's concessions you make to get a building built. And we need to get a building built, and that's one concession.
That's the word I was looking for, concession.
Yeah, I hate to do it, you want everything perfect, and you want everything the best, but you have to realize we don't live in a perfect world, and we can't have, we're not having the best. This community isn't a community that's gonna support a $40 million fire station. And that's what it would take to really build a true, And so let's get something that's gonna last. Maybe it's not a 200-year building like the last one was, but, but
So the commissioners are looking for guidance from us for next week's meeting, or?
They wanted your input.
Have the commission decided to continue?
Yeah, well, I don't know that we formally decided, but the general consensus is that we will continue to build.
So would it be the intent to come out of 27 annual meeting with a yes vote and build the stations at the same time?
It's funny, we had that conversation with somebody too, and the discussion about the savings of them working on 2 projects at the same time as compared to finishing one and then starting the second one, and excavation and land preparation, doing it all at the same time, cost-wise, as compared to making separate projects. So I think that we don't have that. We're not able to answer that question yet. I think we would need more guidance as to how they would recommend us to get the best price with doing the projects. Because the other thing that comes into play is if we're not tearing down this garage, then we don't need to have Sanborn Road completed before you can do this project.
And then there's money not spent.
And you don't need as much garage space up at Sanborn Road. Because remember we had extra garage space because we need to accommodate all the equipment. So again, I think we're not able to answer that question yet. I would want to do it in a way that brought the cost, gave us the best cost value, but also made sense.
I can't imagine how doing both at once would be more expensive. Doesn't make sense.
Well,
What
in
if I
fact,
know about building, it don't make sense.
and you can keep using this building while you're constructing.
Less interruption.
So are you looking for our input next week? Or are you looking for it tonight?
I guess I hadn't really thought about it to that detail, but yeah, I guess I was going to get the sense for the committee, and so I could present that. And certainly, you're welcome to come to the meeting next week.
Well, I'll speak for myself. Everything that you've discussed so far makes a lot of sense. I'm just unfortunately not going to be there to finish the project at the end of tonight's meeting. I'm resigning from both the building committee and, of course, chairmanship. So, but if you're looking for my input prior to my resignation, I think everything that you've stated makes sense. I have this in every experience I've had with the fire district at district meeting. There's always been question marks that raise their ugly heads right at the last minute. And I see a huge question mark if you move forward without securing an agreement with Sanborn Road. Because right in this very building during that second public info meeting, there were a lot of question marks. And I'll be honest with you, that was the first time in all my meetings, that's the first time that I heard that decision had to be brought to the taxpayers of Tilton. I was assured that there was an agreement in place, and I took that person at his word.
We took it at face value. It's the first time I heard it too, Lucy. My input all along may have been different had I known.
Right.
And I could be wrong in this, and I hate saying things that I don't know that are 100% true, but I believe that there is some thought that the selectmen can actually make that decision, but they're unwilling to do it. So it's the same thing as, and I could be, but like the commissioners can spend out of the land and building fund, but they're not going to do it without the voters' input. And I believe the selectmen in Tilton are on that same path, where if they look through RSAs and how they can do things, I believe they could sell that property, but I got the feeling from the selectmen, they're not going to do that without the town. And I think that is where the miscommunication may have
That's
happened.
what I intended to say earlier. I believe they can do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the commissioners can. And if one can and one can't.
And I was looking through the bylaws, and there's nothing about land in the bylaws, so I'd have to go to I don't have the special district RSA with me, I just have the bylaws. So I can look that up, and I can have that answer.
There's a lot of things that end up on warrant articles that aren't necessary legally. It's the appropriate way to do it, so you have transparency. It did come up at the, I believe it was the Tilton Town meeting, about a football field on that property up there. And as you remember, the evolution of the Tilton School District's football team started by a group of volunteer parents. And they secured the use of that property from the diocese who owned it at the time. And they were able to run sort of a volunteer football program for the Winston students. And over time that evolved into two things. One, the school, it was never going to cost the school district any money, right? It's never going to cost the school district any money. Until two things happened, I think the same year, maybe I'm wrong. One was they couldn't get insurance unless they were sanctioned by the school so they could be covered under the school's athletic team insurance. And then the second was they needed to replace a whole bunch of equipment because either it was outdated or rules had changed and half of their equipment was no longer usable. And they didn't have the funds to come up with the money to replace all the equipment. And that was when the school took over the football program and then facilitated putting in the football field inside the track, which was on the reason it came up at the school district meeting as well, because they're asking for money to redo the track and the drainage in the football field. Anyway, so when the diocese sold the property to the town so the town could put the police department on it, the town said that we'll put the building on the property and leave enough room for the football field. But in the same time frame, the football field need went away because it was now at the high school. But then it was like, all right, well, we can use it for Pop Warner football and stuff like that. But even after the police department went on, no parent group was able to get together and utilize the field for a football field. And I don't know that it came up like there's still people out there going, well, we're going to have a football field over there. And of course, I'm thinking to myself, for who? And who's going to spearhead that project and who's going to pay for it? And as we know, that kind of stuff. So.
Do you know if there is one lot up there?
It is.
Who's going to bear the cost of separating?
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out too.
Has never been discussed.
We discussed how big of a piece was needed, and there was sort of some, that sort of bantered around, but I think it was, I'm not sure how much was needed.
Do you know how much is there?
I used to, but I don't.
I'd have to go back to my other files.
Easy enough to find out.
Yeah, no,
And one of the conversations at one of the earlier meetings with the selectmen was, try to put the fire station up close to the road like the police station is, to free up that back space. So it would remain available for a football field.
I know in conversations I had with Lorero, there was space concerns about putting a bigger station than what was there. Because I said, well, what if we just took the Park Street station and put it up at 15,000 square feet with a drive-in, drive-out? That was too big for the piece of property. But I think that's more than needed to be up there anyway, even.
With a disclaimer for accuracy, because oftentimes the tax maps on Onyx are not accurate. It's 4.57 acres.
I was going to say, I thought I heard it was
4.7.
4.57,
5. It was
4.5.
4.5, so would it be 2 1/4? Which would be what, 90,000 square feet? 96,000?
You're better at that than I am. You don't know that off the top of your head now?
No.
He can tell you how many cubic feet are in a tank. But.
I guess,
Yeah.
as far as if you're looking for support from, well, never mind this group, but from me.
Yep.
Will probably matter what the final vision is. and the hump of, I mean, you know what, maybe the trade of land is only a speed bump. More people are telling me it's a brick wall. I mean, I know the difference between a speed bump and a brick wall, but, a lot of people have a fear of the unknown.
Do you think, and if we have a much more affordable plan going forward, that will put the mind at ease of the people in Tilton? Because I assume if at $21 million, that was like they say, well, if we give them this land, they're going to get that 21. If we come in with a much more affordable plan, does that put their mind at ease? Because right now it's unknown to them. If we do a land swap, they don't know what we're putting there, who we're putting there.
Right.
If we come forward with a plan and say, this is our plan and this is our vision, and it's going to be 3 days before our vote, right? 2 days before our vote, but they're going to know at that time exactly what we want to do with that. And I think that might take a lot of that fear of the unknown, and I could be wrong on that,
I
but
very well could,
you know.
because that's, if I have a fear of the unknown, and you show me the known, I got no more fear of the unknown.
Yeah, this is what you're asking, you know, they're gonna know, because they're gonna be, in 2 days, there's no time to change it, right? I would hope to have,
There would be no meaningful legal change
Yeah.
on the floor of either meeting. And anyone who would support that would be wasting their time. Way too much involved.
No, that makes sense. I mean, if you have a plan going towards it, and no plan, oh, well, like they just said, you know, let's just swap land. Well, what happens if we want to build the whole station on that whole area? No. We want to build
this station.
this station this big, and, oh, okay, look at that.
I would assume that the warrant article on the town warrant would be contingent upon the warrant article 2 days later, so it's very much tied to that scope of that project.
And we want to work with the police department up there so that, you know, they've got that parking area off to the side, which, you know, I drive by every day, and a lot of days where there's a lot of vehicles in there, so you know they've got something going on. Obviously, we want to be positioned in a way that we would fringe on that, but it also helps us out when we're having, you know, anything going on. You know, so we want to try to maintain that, and that would give good separation from the two buildings. But the other thing, you know, one of the station plans, I'm not sure if this, they had all 4 bays out the front, so to minimize the amount of pavement, you needed to back trucks, and you didn't need to have a whole big apron on the backside.
Which was also, I think, engineering, a lot of engineering and dirt.
When I spoke to Brian from Lorero, about if I didn't pave the back of the station, so if we didn't have drive-in, drive-out, didn't pave the back, and kind of left it as is, and he said it's a significant savings because of you don't have to design the runoff, you don't have to design the permeability, and it's beyond, again, things that are beyond me. But just coming out of the front of the station and having that really be the only pavement, except for some handicap spots, it's a significant savings on a station that I would not have thought. In my mind, you just throw pavement down. He's like, you don't just do that. He's like, you have to design the runoff, you have to design the drainage, you have to design this. If you're not doing that, that's a significant savings in the cost.
Well, and then you weren't privy to that when we were talking about putting parking over here, and you can't have any of that water running off, so you got to be able to control it, you know, cistern it underground to let it soak back in. It made parking lots really complicated.
Impermeable area
Right.
is a problem.
Yeah, and and they had that little pond for all the roof drainage, and it's not like just running a culvert down to the stream anymore. Can't do that anymore.
Even though that's where it ends up. It's gonna take the long way home.
You filter out all the bad stuff right now. I understand, it's just, well,
So
you
you
know.
have a meeting Tuesday night,
Yeah,
week from today.
Right, it's nice to
Yeah,
see you.
I believe so, that sounds right. That's what I had in my head anyway, the 31st.
So we all remember exit 19 here, when you came up the ramp, it was all forest where they took all those trees down and put those 2 retention ponds in. And of course, I'm thinking to myself, is it, you know, catch-22, or is this really more environmentally friendly than that forest was?
But you know why that's there? That
Because
was a trade-off, because they ruined something somewhere else. That's all that is.
Yeah, that's the 93 widening from Manchester South.
So we have to,
Yeah, for every acre of wetlands, you gotta recreate 10 more. So. Anyway,
So, moving forward, are you going to request that these gentlemen attend next Tuesday's meeting, or are you gonna leave
I'm
here
gonna
with it?
invite them to, but they're, you know, I'm happy to bring forth what we're talking about. And the other thing is, probably follow up with the rest of the committee with an email, see if we can put together, again, it won't be for a little while, once we determine what we're doing next week, and then imagine if everything goes well, the next step will be getting an RFP out there.
is it your feeling that the commissioners will or will not want input from the committee relative to the plan that goes out for RFP?
I'll ask next week. I don't have a clear answer to that.
Because if you don't, if the commissioners have in their head that this is what you want to do,
That makes no sense.
you don't need us.
Right.
If you're open to input, as occurred previously, it's probably okay to have the committee. But if you've got X here, and you've got X there, you've got what we would have done.
But there's more steps after that. You know, evaluating RFPs or submissions, and then all the pieces that come together after that. But yes, we'll talk about that next week. Obviously, the next time the building committee meets, we would like for there to be an agenda that's attention grabbing enough so that we can be coordinated getting to as many people to come as possible. Paul, I said the same thing to the chief a couple weeks ago. I said, maybe it's me. And then it occurred to me that there was somebody else who was a common denominator in all 3 of these buildings who's not with us anymore. And so I'm saying that maybe that had a bigger impact than me. Give me you, Kevin, because you weren't on all the committees, were you?
I've been,
Were you on the Manville Road one?
oh, yeah, I've been here since, shit. When did dirt stop being run? I've been doing this a long time. I've done this 4 or 5 times. Because you remember, there was a plan when I was a commissioner. And I was involved with it. So, you don't ride horses, it doesn't even first rodeo.
I think the committee's important. I think the committee's important because just more people out in the community talking to community people, getting more feedback, and I would, as we move forward, there's going to be questions that architects and engineers are going to ask that would be probably very helpful.
It also adds one more level of oversight that, you've got 1, 2, doesn't hurt to have a third, just making sure that everything is on the straight and narrow.
There's a lot of institutional knowledge that has been acquired through the committee over the years too, and that's to capitalize on.
Yeah, I've gone full circle. From no station, Jesus Christ, can we build a station?
Anything else, Kevin? Tim?
Okay.
I just want to thank you guys again. I know how much work you've put into this and how much time and effort. And we're going to take what you guys put. It's just, we're going to try to make it a little small. That's it. But you guys did a lot of work, so thank you very much.
You're welcome very much. Motion to adjourn. Adjourn before we adjourn, I am definitively resigning, so thank you guys for all your efforts as well. And hopefully the next one moves forward.
Well, thank you for all your hard work.
You're welcome. Adjourned at 6:26.
I just wanted on the record real quick. If you have thoughts, please call me. And please don't feel like you don't have input into this. You've been involved in this from the start, and I value your opinion. So please call me if you do have input. I'll shut it off.
I'll do that for sure.